Hey everyone, how's it going? It's Aleks Ozols here. Today in this next video, I want to kind of take a little deep dive into a topic and try and unpack it slightly. This topic here, I'm trying to keep it, I'm not trying to get too deep because it stemmed from a different idea I was trying to explore, which was quite expansive and was possibly a bit too much for my brain to handle. And that was essentially our chord structures and melodies are kind of a portal to different forms of consciousness, and that I would say is almost kind of common sense. But also, are the epochs of time and the zeitgeists of a particular time, are they also locked into kind of like chord structures and sequences, but is there kind of a mathematical code underpinning all of that, if that makes sense? Because essentially music is a manifestation of mathematics. Some people might argue, some mathematicians might argue, right? And also the epochs of time, or a particular zeitgeist of a time, the feeling, perhaps even an egregore in that time is an energy, right? And is there a kind of a mathematical underpinning of that as well? Do you know what I mean? So what I'm trying to say is, when you're kind of playing chords on a piano, it invokes a feeling, and I guess there's different types of chord structures coming from different eras of, let's just say the classical musical tradition. Kind of romanticism and whatnot. This whole kind of continuum. There's clearly different styles of music which kind of, just different feelings which kind of encapsulated kind of each era. So what I'm trying to understand is that feeling on an energetic level, which was captured, and then within these chord structures, was there a kind of a mathematic underpinning of that time? Does that make sense? I know that sounds nuts. But I think if you kind of really think about it, how mathematics is, some people might say it's a kind of, it's one of the languages of the universe. For example, you look at like the Fibonacci sequence, which manifests in like, sunflowers and snail shells and a plethora of other things. So I think the whole kind of maths is a kind of a language of the universe, or one of the languages of the universe. I don't think is a controversial statement, but how it correlates with music is what I find really quite fascinating, and how music kind of influences emotions. Again, I think this little triad here, maths, music, and emotions. I think this is a fascinating thing to me. So I think one of my quick examples I'm going to try and give is, for example, like a two-tone melody, which you might hear, such as sorry, that kind of ominous sequence of notes, that kind of chromatic melody there. I don't know, you could hear it like maybe like dubstep and grime, and just kind of like the Jaws, the Jaws kind of theme, and just any kind of like any representation of an ominous situation or a dangerous situation is kind of like, can be kind of represented by that sequence of notes in a very cliched way. My question is, how does those sequence of notes make you feel that way? Like, what is the kind of the mathematical underpinning, and is this something which can kind of be explored, fleshed out by someone who's more intelligent than myself? Is there a way to kind of quantify how that sequence of notes, how it affects someone and can put them in an aggressive and antagonistic mood? What's the mathematical reason for that? Do you know what I mean? How could you explain that through maths? Do you get what I'm saying? And to take it a little bit further, can we put the soul into this equation? And the reason I ask that is because, in my experience when I was growing up, and again when I was kind of like exploring the whole kind of the dubstep scene, and I was kind of like flirting around with like grime, and I was kind of producing just kind of like genres, producing within those kind of crossover genres, I noticed a lot, I came across characters who are kind of like interesting to say the least. And kind of they had a bit of a kind of, at a baseline level, they were kind of a bit antagonistic and kind of moody and just had a bit of a kind of an antagonistic type of kind of spirit in that time. And I just find it interesting how people with that kind of spirit, and I'm not saying soul because maybe it's when I say spirit, I'm talking about something a little bit more transient. The kind of how they were in the time, not necessarily soul, not necessarily archaic, not an archaic thing. It's more just how they were in the time. But how was it the spirit that they had at the time was drawn to the kind of those dark melodies, to those chromatic melodies? And I find it was quite a consistent thing. Why is it that dark sounding music kind of attracts people who have that kind of antagonistic and deviant personality? And why is that deviant personality always kind of manifesting itself in just kind of being in opposition to others and causing problems? Do you know what I mean? So why is there a correlation between objectively dark sounding music and people with those kind of personalities? And then, to mess your head up even further, is that mathematically quantifiable? So this is really what I'm trying to explore. This is an idea I'm really trying to explore, and I hope some of you are kind of, whoever's listening to this right now, if you got this far, congratulations to you. But I want to know, is there a way to quantify that through a kind of a scientific method, e.g. maths? So I think, and I'll try and give another example. I'll try and go on to a slightly more deeper example. If a deviant personality is attracted to that kind of music, how could, say, for example, someone find joy in it and happiness in it? And I want to explore the idea of, is there an objective type of morality or feeling when it comes to just being alive in this world? Or is there kind of like an objective state of being in this world? The reason I say this, because let me just give an example. I was just wasting my time on Reddit the other day, and someone was talking. There was a thread basically about kind of like music and moods and whatnot, and I said something to the effect of, I find that the time when I was kind of making darker music was when that something in my soul was kind of unsettled, if that makes sense. I had this kind of unsettled feeling, or I myself was just going through a bit of a bad time and an unsettling time, and I feel that kind of manifested itself in my way wanting to create that kind of music. And then some woman, I believe, responded, and you have to give me a moment because I have to find I'm gonna have to find the chat. Okay, so this woman said, and I'll actually quote. So my original comment was, I can understand the crazy, interesting sound design and texture stuff piquing your interest because it does mine too. And I feel, if anything, this arouses the intellect, right? So that was me talking about sound design. I believe that's kind of that stimulates intellect. However, in my opinion, when it comes to harmony and melodies, it's really about where your soul and spirit is at the time, e.g. how harmonious or disturbed is one with oneself and or the environment around them. So in essence, if you're at ease and you're feeling good within your soul, the kind of the music you'll create will sound good as well. And obviously, on the flip side, if you're in a disturbed kind of state, then you're going to tend to gravitate towards or create more disturbing type of music. And then this woman responded, interesting, do you mean that you might listen to or enjoy more dissonant atonal music when you're stressed or unsettled? And she goes, if I'm understanding correctly, it's not like that at all for me. When I'm happy and flourishing, I love to listen to some Crumb or Gube Dulina or Sariao or Has, because I find it beautiful and life-affirming. Now, sorry, I'll probably mispronounce some of those names, but I'm not really familiar with these composers, but I checked out one or two of them, and the music was, it was very, very vivid, but kind of chaotic and even quite disturbing. And it was definitely there was something kind of a little bit off key about that. Now, I find it strange how someone can find quote unquote beautiful and life affirming feelings within that type of music. And I think the idea I want to explore here is, again, in terms of an objective morality when it comes to music, is like, the fact that she said that, already she was affirming the idea that this music was kind of chaotic. Do you know what I mean? So I think we could say there's an objective standard there. She said, you know, I find this life affirming, and then went on to the kind of, you know, and then she named these composers who are making clearly dark, chaotic sounding music, and she said, I find this life affirming, and that's fine. But obviously, you've acknowledged that this music is dark, right? And you know, and you haven't said something like, oh, I didn't notice that. It's just life affirming to me. But the way you responded to me, you've acknowledged that it is dark. So how can someone find a life-affirming feeling within dark music? And it makes me wonder, is it kind of a case of like, if you're living in a kind of conditions and which you find very repressive or oppressive, perhaps morally oppressive, in a sense that you're being told, let me give a classic example of, you know, the girl who has a very dominating father, maybe like a morally, you know, he's a morally dominating father who's saying, you know, you must behave this way, you must behave that way, you know, no sex before marriage, and then she goes off and sleeps with 1,000 guys in one day. You know what I mean? It's a kind of a reaction, and I sometimes think when this woman says that she finds this kind of dark, chaotic music life affirming, does she come from an environment which is very kind of oppressive morally, and as a kind of a reaction, she finds that, okay, I'm going to regain myself, or my sense of self, and by kind of contradicting this standard which has been set on me, and by doing so, I've kind of created this feeling of joy, like, oh, I'm reaffirming myself, my identity against this kind of oppressive moral structure. Do you know what I mean? But I can only see it that way. But if that's not the case, and you genuinely feel happy listening to that music, then maybe you are just a deviant kind of personality, you know. And I don't really want to say that to her, but I can explain myself to her. But I don't want to be rude. But and then I think this kind of, you know, and this I'll probably explore this in future videos. But this kind of makes me wonder: do we just have different types of souls, you know, on this planet? And maybe there is no objective standard, and maybe we really just do have different types of souls who are kind of a darker nature, or of a kind of a more positive kind of nature. But maybe there isn't even any dark or good. Maybe it's just different, you know. Yeah, I don't necessarily believe that, but that's just I'm just putting that out there. But it's just strange to me that someone can say that they just find such joy in such dark music. It's just strange, unless they themselves are of a deviant, antagonistic nature. You know, the type which is gravitating towards these two-tone notes, and is there a mathematical underpinning to that? Is there a kind of a mathematical underpinning to the soul? You know, is there a deeper metaphysical structure underneath this all? Is it important to think about these things, or is it a complete waste of time, you know? Right, let me just see if there's anything else. Yeah, I'm not too sure what else to say on this subject right in this moment in time, and I don't want to go like on too much of a tangent. So I'm gonna leave that one there for you. I don't really know. This is more kind of maybe something for discussion, or if someone has something to kind of, you know, present which could add to this, that would be amazing. So again, is there an objective morality, and perhaps even an objective form of consciousness, especially pertaining to music? You know, can you let me know what you think? And underpinning that, is there more scientific means of quantifying that? Is there? Now, I mean, I don't know. I'm sure I could ask ChatGPT and just ruin everything. My my kind of childlike wonder of life in the universe. I could probably just go to ChatGPT and I'll answer it. But I think the whole idea of putting this to YouTube and perhaps creating a discussion, I think that's one of the lovely things about being a human being, you know, just having these kind of exchanges. So if you manage to stay this long into the talk, you know, that's amazing. Thank you very much. And I hope this chat doesn't seem like kind of something which I hope it doesn't come across as a means of leading you down some pointless rabbit hole. You know, just thinking about these things just generally does stimulate interesting thought within my head, and I hope it's kind of something which might do so for you. You know, it does truly give me pleasure to think about these really, really, really weird, abstract things, because, you know, you do see it on a physical day-to-day life. You do see how kind of music and by its extension vibration can affect mood, it can affect consciousness. So if the universe is mathematical, then surely by that kind of by that reasoning there should be some sort of connection. Yeah? So I'll leave that one with you. Let me know what you think, and I will speak to you soon. Yeah? Alright. Aleks Ozols signing out. See you later.